If we were to think about from a policy perspective and even generally that $10 trillion dream, where do you think we are at today and what's the path ahead? What do we need to focus on? I keep talking to my friends a lot of times that maybe we missed that entire manufacturing, that boom that happened. We missed that age where we could have gotten a very strong superior manufacturing nation. Do we still focus on developing that? Do we focus on digital economy? What does the government need to focus on from a policy perspective now to get to that $10 trillion?
So I think the first thing from the policy perspective is to get the arrangement of the economic system in the country which we have, the financial system which we have, and the fiscal system which we have. These are the three main components: the economic work or economic performance, so to say. We have a very, very confused and the mixed kind of system in the country. And that is where basically the policy has got it wrong. And that requires, to my mind, a fundamental restructuring. I'll explain it this to you. We discussed a little bit about the governments not being the ideal or the right kind of businessman. That's a very profound policy view. Should the government be in business, or should the government be doing what is also known as the public goods and services? What is the main role of the government? The main role of the government, in my judgment, and that is the central argument of the book, is to deliver excellent, good quality, in adequate measure, the public goods and services. And let me take a couple of examples of the public goods and services. One is classical, the defense, security, law and order kind of thing. If the governments are able to provide security on the defense front, internal security, and a good law and order system, which is public good, then you can see that the factors of production, the people and the capital, can perform very well in the in the economy. The example which you gave of West Bengal, there it was a not only a failure of the government undertaking the policy or the business function, it was also a failure of the government of the day not assuring the right kind of law and order, and the functioning for private sector to survive. The case of Aditya Birla being dragged out, the Aditya Birla's father being dragged out from the factories and being beaten, led to assumption by most industries there that West Bengal is not where they can do even whatever business they were allowed by the government of India policy to engage in, and they went out from there. The kind of labor militant labor movement which came up there, which did not result into even a honest day's work being done, led to the industrial downfall. So the main function of the government is to sort of provide the public good. Let me give you another example of a public good which the government need to provide. What we see today, there is a lot of debate about the carbon, but there is not much debate about the pollution in the country. There is a consciousness going into the people's mind these days, but India is one of the most polluted country in the world. There is a chapter in the book where I analyze the state of the economy and the pollution in the country, and whether you take air, whether you take water, or whether you take from the cities front, we have one of the most polluted system. The polluted environment creates problem for not only the industry, which, by the way, being pursued with wrong policies, where you can socialize the pollution by sort of ejecting the pollutants and the carbon into the environment without paying any cost. That's also a wrong policy. But at the same time, government doing nothing. Delhi, where I'm sitting, witnesses one of the worst situation every winter, and it's unlivable. No industry, no human beings, no people, no individuals, no households can take care of the pollution problem. The pollution can be handled only, it's a classic common good, it's a classic public good, and the government can only handle it. So we can go on, there are numerous kind of the public goods which the government need to provide. But unfortunately, in our case, the government spends more on sustaining the unsustainable, unprofitable public sector enterprises. What happened in Air India? Air India, there was no need for government to run Air India. After running Air India for so long and incurring so much of expenditure and losses, finally the Air India has been sold for 2,500 crores rupees, and government has written off. This is not much talked about. The government has written off 55,000 crores of equity and 80,000 crores of loans. That is the cost. And the same mistake we are doing for BSNL. BSNL already the government has pumped in about 1 lakh crore. So, and we pumped in 3 lakh crores or 3.5 lakh crores in the public sector banks. These are not the government's use of the government money or the public money. The public money should be used for the public goods and services. And by running the public sector in a very relatively much bad use of the capital, more inefficient use of capital, and more inefficiently, you end up sort of wasting the capital of the. There is a chapter in the book where I talk about 50s and 60s, that how at that time, even in 50s and 60s, the government realized that there is so much of inefficiency of the capital. The one ratio which we measure is the capital output ratio, that how much of the unit of capital you require to produce one unit of the output. The capital output ratio kept on increasing in the country. You required more and more capital to produce, because it was the inefficient public sector which was doing. So the short point which I say in this book and is this basic pivot, which to my mind has three elements. I talked about two. One, the government should get out of the business, privatize almost everything. There are ways to do it, which we can discuss, but privatize everything, get out of the business, the private goods and services. And that's a very fundamental change. It's a very large change. And the second one is focus the government on the public goods and services. And the third one, which also I talk about in the book, is to undertake the government's core function, the second core function of the government, and that's the redistribution. The government has to tax the rich, the guys who produce more income, so by income taxes and all, and by taxing wealth. Today, you don't have the wealth tax in the system, whereas lots of wealth is being generated. Our GDP is about 3 trillion, but our wealth is about 15 trillion dollar. That 15 trillion dollar of GDP of the wealth, which is concentrated into very few relatively fewer part of the economy, doesn't get taxed at all, right? So you don't raise the resources from where you need to raise resources, and still you have a very large poverty in the country. You have 10% to 12% biological poverty, where people don't get enough of the calories to eat. And you have a very large, about 20 to 23% of the multidimensional poverty, where you measure not only the calorific intake, but you also take care of the other needs, housing, the health, education, and other kind of things, the minimum which is required. So I think this pivot, the third pivot, is to sort of redistribute the wealth, which is the income and the wealth both, in favor of the people by taxing the rich. I think these are the three basic changes. If we can make, then we can pave the way for the $10 trillion economy. If we don't, and if we continue as we are doing business as usual, we'll probably grow at 4, 5, 6%, but we will not reach to 10 trillion by middle of 2030.